Hello and welcome. I am Laura Ellis. I am founder of Sensory Mother. If you don't know who I am already, Sensory Mother has come through a combination of nearly 20 years experience as a teacher, most recently focusing on special educational needs and inclusion, and as lived experience of being a mum to twin neurodivergent boys. One of my boys has a dual diagnosis of autism and ADHD, and he has significant additional difficulties and challenges that have made my job of parenting him quite challenging at times and led me to experience burnout at one point because I didn't understand what was going on. I couldn't help him. I didn't know how to help him. And so everything became completely disastrous, in all honesty. Okay, so that is where Sensory Mother comes from. So I had a whole career change and I started working with university students who were neurodivergent. I started helping them to better understand how their brains were working and to develop coping strategies for them, to really support them to manage the overwhelm of university life. And that massively helped me to be able to understand more about what life was going to hold for my son as he grew up. So it really helped me to change what I was doing for him to make sure that he understood himself better, or he understands himself better, and he understands the kinds of things that actually help him, so that as he grows up he'll be able to ask for that type of support when he needs it. Okay, so that's kind of a brief background into me if you haven't already been in my world at all. But what I wanted to do is I've toyed with the idea of kind of a podcast in inverted commas, because it's not a real podcast, it's just me videoing myself. But I've done this in the past and I really loved doing it. And I have got so much to say on so many things that I can't always get all of my ideas into an Instagram post because I haven't got enough time. And I have to be really careful about the words I say on an Instagram post, whereas here I can just be a little bit more natural. So there's something that's been coming up a lot this week with the parents that I've been working with one-to-one, and I found myself talking about this thing over and over again, and I thought, you know what, I want to make a recording of this because I think it will be helpful to many people, not just the families that I'm working with at the moment. So one of the things that I absolutely advocate for in all of the work that I do with parents of neurodivergent children is really kind of nailing down predictability and certainty, really making that our mantra to be able to best support our children, predictability and certainty. So one of the things that I will often work with families around is how predictable and certain was that particular thing. You know, when we're seeing meltdowns from our children, often it is because they are feeling so out of control and overwhelmed because they're terrified of the thing that's happening, because they don't know, they can't predict how certain this is, and it doesn't feel safe to them for that reason. Okay, so when we're talking about neurodivergent children, we are potentially talking about children who have a range of different needs, okay? I always say that it's very difficult to be diagnosed with one neurodivergent condition without having traits of other neurodivergent conditions. So I kind of just use the term neurodivergence to basically signify our children who are struggling with and who have diagnoses or suspected diagnoses of things like autism, ADHD, pathological demand avoidance, PDA, those kinds of things, dyslexia, dyscalculia, all of those kinds of things. They come under one big umbrella, and of course they are each individually very different, but there are often some common traits that run through. So it's important that we understand kind of a little bit more of on a holistic level, that there are lots of common traits. Okay, so one of the main things that we need to understand as parents is that our children are living in high states of alertedness, high state of anxiety almost all of the time. They are preconditioned to expecting something to go wrong. They are constantly on the lookout for the next thing that's going to go wrong. This is because they spend a lot of their time seemingly getting things wrong, not quite understanding things the way other people seem to understand them, not quite being able to work things out the way other people seem to be able to work them out, always reacting in a very different way to other people and how they seem to react to the same thing. So they are constantly anticipating the next thing that's going to go wrong. It means that they are living on the edge of their nerves all the time. And of course, as parents, what this often means for us is that we see that our children are constantly on the verge of explosion. And the very smallest thing will tip them into that explosion really quickly. Now, I've created the pause method, which is my signature program, which I talk about all the time because I'm really, really proud of it. Because parents who are struggling to understand their children and who are struggling to manage these big emotional outbursts that they are having really, really benefit from the pause method. I made it because of what I've lived myself. And so I talk about it all the time because I'm really proud of it and I know how helpful it is for parents. But one of the first step of the pause method is really understanding that anxiety response in our children, what that looks like, why it happens, why it plays out the way it does. That's step one, really understanding that very first thing. But for the purpose of this video, I want us to think about one of the massive triggers of this huge anxiety response for our children, and that is the unpredictability and uncertainty of most aspects of life. Okay, and I've been using this analogy in my one-to-one sessions that I've been doing with parents this week, and I've found myself going over it a few times this week, and I thought, you know what, I want to make a video on this. So the analogy is thinking about stepping stones. Okay, so imagine we come to a stream or a river and we see some stepping stones. Now, if we see a whole load of people walk across those stepping stones and nobody wobbles, nobody falls, those stepping stones are completely secure and we can see the evidence with our own eyes, then we are much more likely to trust that those stepping stones are going to be okay. We might still approach them with a bit of trepidation. We might still put our foot out and just test, is that one okay? But we'll feel more comfortable at stepping across the river. Yeah, okay. Now, in real life, we don't always and we don't often get the opportunity to watch other people safely step across every single stepping stone of life. We don't often get that opportunity. And for our children, they therefore are automatically assuming that every single one of those stepping stones that they can see is going to fail under their feet. That is their default setting. They think that it's not going to work out for me because I've got so much experience in the past of when I take a step, things get wobbly. So I'm assuming that that same thing's going to happen. Okay, so if we can understand that every single thing our child is doing potentially is one of these stepping stones, one of these potentially frightening situations that they're going to be in where they don't know if when they put their foot down, it's going to be safe for them to do that, then we can start to understand a little bit more about, oh, okay, if they don't know what's coming up, what the next step is, then they're probably going to doubt that that next step is safe and secure. They're not going to assume, oh, it'll be fine. Mom or dad will have organised everything. It'll all be fine. They won't assume that. They will assume it won't be fine. They won't be able to cope. Remember, they're living on the very edge of their nerves. And so if they take that step, and something wobbles slightly, something's not quite the way they expected it to be, the explosion will come. Even if it's only a slight wobble, and you might think there's no need for that. It was a bit of a wobble, but it wasn't that much of a wobble. So when we can kind of think about these stepping stones, it can help us to kind of think, okay, right, so what does our child need to know then? In an ideal world, our child needs to see me step onto that step in front of them, and they need to know this is completely safe and secure. So how do we do that in real life? Well, the way we do that in real life is we make firm plans. We talk about what is coming up next, and then after that, and we make the plans as firm as possible to reassure them as much as we're able to that the next step they are going to feel safe and secure with. We give them options so that they can feel in control of when they take that step, how they take that step, the terms around which they take that step. Now that is particularly important for when we're talking about PDA, pathological demand avoidance. Everything I talk about in my work is all based around that understanding that demands are hugely anxiety provoking for our children, whether or not they have official diagnoses of PDA. For many of our children, the same principles apply. They need to feel in control, have some autonomy over what happens so that they can feel safe with that next step. So if they've got the option to decide what the next step is going to be, or how they take the next step, or when they take the next step, then that straight away gives them more of a sense of control and autonomy over the next step. Now, we can talk to our children about these plans, and for some of our children, just talking about them is perfectly fine. That's enough for them to feel safe and secure. They might ask you a number of times to repeat what you're saying. You might find that they ask you the same question over and over again. It's not because they're trying to annoy you, even though sometimes that's what happens. We get really annoyed by all the questions. What they're trying to do is get as much safety and security and reassurance that that is the thing that's going to happen. It feels more like fact to them the more times they are hearing it and it's being confirmed to them. Now, another way that we can make this feel more like fact, more like something that's not going to change, is if we write it down. So if we can write down a list of the things that are going to happen, that helps. That can help them to feel much more safe and secure, because now it's in black and white. It's less of just an idea that something that might happen. It's now in black and white. This is the firm, confirmed, factual plan. Many of our children really kind of have that very black and white thinking. It's either real or it's fake. And sometimes they can't really tell the difference. So sometimes for some children, having a written plan is their way of, or it really helps them to feel that the stepping stone is secure, that the next stepping stone is secure. We can use visuals in the form of using pictures. So if it's, if that's appropriate to use a picture to go with each of the steps of the plan, each of the stepping stones. We can be very, very specific and very kind of concrete in terms of, instead of just saying, oh, we might have pizza for tea, actually taking them to the freezer and showing them the pizza box. This is the pizza that we will have for tea. Feels safer, more secure, more stable and predictable for them. So I'd like you to think about this analogy, about the stepping stone analogy. And when you're thinking about a meltdown that has taken place already, I'd like you to think, how secure were the steps on that journey? Or actually, were they not secure at all? Was I just assuming that my child knew what steps they needed to take and how to take those steps? Was I putting more, was I expecting more of them that they were able to deliver, or that they were comfortable or capable of managing? And actually, could I have made those steps feel more secure by having a clear plan that was written down in advance, so my child knew exactly what was going to happen on each step of the journey? Okay, now we can do this really simply for things like morning routines. We can write down a plan. Even better if we can talk to our child, give them a little bit more autonomy over perhaps the order in which some of the activities happen, some of the routines happen, because sometimes we can be real sticklers for, you wake up, you go to the bathroom, you get yourself changed, you brush your teeth, then you go downstairs. And actually, they might, if they've got some control over that plan, they might say, I'm really hungry though, can I go downstairs and have my breakfast first and then come back up? Well, I would suggest to you that you think, I just want to make sure at some point during the morning they've eaten breakfast, they've got dressed, they've brushed their teeth. And it doesn't really matter which order they do that in. And so sometimes we can be a bit rigid around, no, you do this, then you do this, then you do this. And actually that doesn't really matter. As long as everything gets done, if we can give them the control and autonomy over the order in which it gets done, and they feel like they've got that control and safety and security, and we feel good because all things are going to get done, and probably with less conflict than if we are trying to just go ahead with our agenda. So that is really what I'd like you to think about. I'd like you to think about what kind of things can you put in place more regularly for your life to make sure as much of your life, as much of their life as possible, is predictable and certain. They know what's happening, what's coming up. They know what the plan is. They know what we're having for tea. They know where mum's going to be while I'm at school. They know all of these things. So there are fewer doubts or potential doubts and questions in their mind, because every question they have feels like a wobbly step on that stepping stone. So I'd love for you to have a think about this, how you could implement this in your life more routinely, so that you can help your child to feel safe and secure with each of the steps that they take across the ravine. Okay, now I know that the very next question is, yeah, but what happens if the plan needs to change? And that is a really difficult one for all of our children, and many of our children. And that is going to be the topic for my next video. So thank you so much. I would love for you to come over to Instagram and DM me a little comment, or put in the post around this podcast episode, what you've enjoyed about it, what your key takeaways are, and also there's a form linked next to this, so you can email me directly with any queries, any questions, anything, if you'd like to have a one-to-one discussion with me about any of the aspects of life that are challenging at the moment. You can certainly do that. So thank you so much for staying with me till the end and listening to my analogy. I hope it made sense to you. This is what I'm like. I just go off on a tangent, and I can't do any of this on an Instagram post. So thank you so much. Take care. I'll see you next time.